So we're going to look at how to locate secondary data on Statistics Canada. Okay, so under Services and Information, we can find a link to accessing our data. To access data, you can filter the results by a particular keyword topic of your choice, or you can use the checkboxes below, and they are organized under subject header, geography header, frequency, survey or statistical program. These are check all that apply checkboxes, so you can check multiple checkboxes. And the parentheses will indicate how many tables exist for those particular topics. So I'm going to look at transportation. Okay, and it narrows down the topics. Okay, and some tables will appear here. I do want to narrow it down more. So I'm going to select province or territory. And perhaps I'll look at changing the frequency to monthly data. Okay, so in our section here of all the tables that exist, narrowed it down to 8. I'm going to look at new motor vehicle sales data table. Okay, so the view of the table is really just a condensed view of some of the data. We can definitely customize this by selecting the Add Remove Data button. Okay, so we can customize the table according to geography, vehicle type, origin of manufacturer, sales, reference period, and we can also customize the layout. So we'll look at all of those. So let's start with geography. And right now it's all of Canada, so I'm going to expand that. And rather than having all of Canada's data, I want to specifically look at Ontario, and then maybe I compare it to Quebec. Okay, and then vehicle type. Right, I could keep it as the total of all new motor vehicles, or let's see what our options are. I can narrow it down and just look at passenger cars, or maybe I want to compare it with trucks and not look at the total. Origin of manufacturer. So by default, it is the total, but I can decide to compare domestic and non-domestic. For sales, it's in units, so like number of vehicles sold, and dollars, dollar amount. I actually would like to keep both of those. Reference period. So it only goes from September 2019 to January 2020 by default. Okay, so let's take this back to January, and then let's go back a few years, see if we notice any trends. Okay, and let's see if it will allow me to go to the most recent month that has passed. Okay, so before I click on apply, I do want to look at the layout. It will indicate to me how everything is being organized, right? So again, this is our sort of default minimal view. And if you happen to select many geographical regions, it may be better to place that as rows. Or if you have, in the situation that I've done here, I've selected quite a few reference periods. Right, so right now the reference periods, the time frames, they are in columns, but I've selected quite a few of them. So it would really be better to have them placed as rows. Okay, so selecting rows, and now we're ready to apply, see what our data looks like. Okay, so we can see we've got sales, the reference period that we selected, from 2015 to 2020, and it did stop at January 2020. The first portion of the table is showing the number of vehicles, and the second portion of the table is showing the dollar value of vehicles sold. Okay, and then the columns represent, in Quebec, passenger cars, trucks, North American versus non-domestic, and then again, same idea for Ontario. Okay, so we're going to look at downloading this data. So after clicking the download options, choose the comma separated values, download as displayed, excluding accompanying symbols. Okay, so this downloading into my downloads folder, but ultimately I want to upload it into Google Drive, and I have my Intro to Stats Google Drive folder open here. So I'm going to click on New File Upload. Okay, and you want to make sure that it is connected to where the file downloaded. And so it did download to my PC downloads folder right here, the comma separated value file. Okay, and if you were to open this up on your computer, rather than uploading it to Google Sheets, it would open up in Excel if you happen to have that program, which you could, of course, download from the student portal. Okay, I will be showing you how to use Google Sheets since that's accessible for everybody. Okay, so it has uploaded here. Okay, and if I click on that file, it opens up into sort of a viewer, and I want to actually open it up in Google Sheets. So I'm going to select that. And after the data file opens up, we want to examine it. And it does look as it was displayed on the website with the reference period as columns. The next couple of columns shows the number of vehicles sold broken down by province, broken down by whether it was a passenger car versus a truck, and broken down even further by the manufacturer, North American versus overseas. Okay, we do want to clean this data up somewhat. Okay, so we'll notice that there's a header here, and there's also a footer here. Okay, and also the name of the file and whatnot. So there's quite a few things we want to clean up here. So I'm going to start by renaming the file New Motor Vehicle Sales. So that way when I go to open it up again from my Google Drive, I'm going to know what the data was about just from the title alone. And then this tab down here, I want to rename that as well. I'm just going to call it data. Sorry, we can't see that. There it is. And I also want to add another tab just to insert that header and the footer into. So I'm just going to call that info and go back to the data tab. And I want to copy or cut actually, okay, all of this header information. So you can either go to edit cut or you can use Control X. Okay, and then we're going to paste that. So you can go to edit, copy, or you can click on Control C. Okay, and then also from the bottom, there was some footer information that I want to remove from here. Okay, so Control X, the info tab, Control V. Okay, so having done that, we can get rid of those first rows just to bring the variables up. Okay, and we also don't need this extra column here. So we're going to delete that. And another thing that we can do here is sort of clean up these variable names. We really only want one cell to display the entire variable name. Okay, so I'm going to rename this Quebec car sales. Well, we better be more specific because that was domestic. Quebec domestic car sales. Okay, so you can see that that title has extended over into the next column. You can either widen that column up at the top like that, or you can just wrap this title, and that happens in the Format tab. So select the title for the variable, Format, Text Wrapping, Wrap. Okay, so now it's wrapped into that column. So I'm just going to extend this variable down to the next 4, since they were all for Quebec, and just edit each one. So we've got the next one is still cars, but it's non-domestic. So we're going to just change the header a little bit. Okay, and then this next one is domestic, but it's truck sales rather than cars. Okay, and then this last one here for Quebec is non-domestic, trucks. Okay, so I actually don't want the plural in there. I'm going to just fix that real quick. Okay, so then the next four is Ontario. So I'm just going to copy and paste all of these. And then we can just change all these Quebec headers into Ontario headers. You can just type that in, or to, simplify this and make it faster, we can use the edit, find, and replace option. So I'm going to replace Quebec with Ontario. So we want to make sure we're not replacing these Quebec titles with Ontario. So this tool, this find and replace tool, is only going to replace what I have highlighted here. Okay, so I can select replace all, and there, all done. Right, so it's a really useful tool if you have to do multiple changes. Okay, so now that I've done that, I really don't need all of these extra rows up here. Let's just copy and paste the reference period. And yeah, we can get rid of all of these extra rows here. We really want the variables to be at the top. Okay, so that's all lined up. Okay, and then if you recall, the first body of the table represents the number of units sold, but as we scroll down halfway, we get to the dollar amount sold. So really, we would rather have all this data at the side, because there's a new variable for each of these columns here, rather than having it at the bottom. I'm going to cut and paste it so that it's at the side of the table. Okay, so we'll cut that and we'll bring it back up to the top. And we're going to paste here. And we don't need to have the reference period repeated, so we're going to cut that or delete that column. And then the variable names are just a repeat of all of these, rather than being the quantities sold, though it's the dollar amount sold. So we're just going to update these a little bit. So again, I'm going to do that using the find and replace. So rather than having all of these say sales, okay, I want them to say sales with the dollar unit. Okay, and we replace all. Okay, so this data is now ready. We could take any one of these columns and we could find out what the average sales are. We could find out what the measures of spread, such as the standard deviation, would be. We could graph it, create a histogram, look at the distribution, look at the shape of the data. We could create a box plot, identify if there's any outliers. We could also make comparisons amongst variables as well. We could look at trends over time by looking at two variable analysis. And this is something that we'll do in a future tutorial. We will learn how to use Google Sheets to analyze data numerically and graphically.